Hello everyone, and thank you for joining us today for this webinar where we'll discuss best practices for data migration towards MBSE. My name is Marie and I will be the host for today's webinar. Before we dive into the content, I have a few housekeeping items to share with you. So first, at the bottom of the screen are multiple application tools that you can use, but most of them are already displayed on your desktop. All those application tools are resizable and movable, so feel free to move them around to get the most out of your desktop space. If you think that the slides are a bit too small, you can expand your presentation area by using the pointer in the corner of the widget, or you can also maximize it to full screen by clicking on the arrows in the top right corner. If you happen to have any issues with your audio or your video, you can find some answers in the help widget located at the bottom of the screen. Please note that next to the presentation area, we have a resource list available for you. You will find a copy of today's slide deck and links to resources around the topic of the discussion. Have a look and download everything that you may find useful. For those who want to rewatch the presentation or share it with a colleague, the webinar will be recorded and sent to the email that you registered with within 24 hours. And lastly, if you have any questions during the presentation, feel free to submit them through the Q&A. We're here to answer you live via the chat, so don't hesitate to reach out. And in case we run out of time or we didn't manage to answer you, we'll make sure to follow up later by email. Now, let me introduce quickly our speaker. Richard Weston is Practice Director for horizontal solutions within Jama Software, including data and process transformation. He is based in the UK and he has been working in the systems and software industry for over 30 years. So from there, Richard, I will hand it over to you so you can share your expertise and best practices around data migration from legacy solutions.
Thanks, Marie. Hi, everybody. Today, we're going to look at what MBSE is and also how you can get data into MBSE to provide benefits to your organization to get more consistency. So we're going to jump straight into looking a little bit about what exactly is MBSE. So MBSE, model-based systems engineering, is something that is a concept come up with from the OMG. So I thought it would be a good idea to give you their definition. I'm going to read it out. It's the formalized application of modeling to support system requirements, design, analysis, verification, and validation activities, beginning in the conceptual design for, oh, blooming heck. So we looking at these words, it's really, really complicated to read. And really, by the end of it, you don't fully understand, well, what actually is model-based systems engineering. If you read between the lines, model-based systems engineering is the elimination of documents to combine all of your different engineering data. So that's requirements, architecture, behavior, verification, and validation into single data-driven model environments, all tied together with relationships. So many people think MBSE is modeling, and modeling does form part of it, but it's not only visual modeling, it's actually data modeling. If we take another angle of what is MBSE, again, lots of words. This is for this time from Lou Wheatcraft. Lou is co-chair for the INCOSE's Requirements Working Group, which is the largest working group in INCOSE. He explains that MBSE can't be effectively practiced when viewed from just one perspective. Now that means, if you just look at MBSE from a modeling perspective, you don't see the whole of MBSE. If you just look at MBSE from a requirements perspective, you don't see the whole of MBSE. So it's lots of different types of data interconnected together with relationships viewed from different angles or dimensions. I've tried to draw this in a picture. So here you can see the different types of data that you might have, but we all know that you can't look at architecture without seeing how it ties to behavior. You can't do verification without seeing how it ties to requirements. All of these different disciplines tie themselves together, and they tie themselves together with relationships. Now, if you understand, okay, this test case must verify that requirement, or this architecture realizes that requirement, this design iterates that architecture. Once you understand how your data relates together, you can draw an information model. And that information model, the bit in the middle, is an MBSE systems model. This is MBSE, not the model itself, but the fact that it's data and relationships between data. Once you can understand what your engineering data is, this is tool agnostic. You've not looked at any systems that will manipulate this yet. Once you have an understanding of all of the different engineering data in your organization, then you can break it down and say, well, what would be the best tool to look at and manipulate the data in your MBSE framework? So you might have requirements tools, modeling tools, change management systems, development tools, etc. All of those different applications will have some visibility into your MBSE data model. And collectively, this is MBSE. So MBSE is a collection of all of these different systems interacting with all of your engineering data and making sure that when you're sitting in any of these systems, be it requirements, design, test, deployment, simulation, you have access not just to the data that that system itself manages, but also you have a view of the relationships to the data that sits inside of other systems. So from the design, you can see relationships to the requirement. From the simulation, you can see relationships back to the design, back to the requirements. So MBSE is the data model-based systems engineering. So if you've followed so far, it's quite a strong structure. And once you have an understanding of it, and once you can move your organization towards it, it brings a lot of benefits. Jama Software have actually produced an MBSE framework it's almost like a kick-starting your process. So you can use Jama Software to have a beginning of an understanding of what your MBSE data model should look like. And then you can look to figuring out which aspects of it are tied to different tools to manipulate your engineering information. The benefit of that framework is that it saves you time and it accelerates the speed that you can get to actually doing some engineering and the speed that you can produce actual systems at the end. It makes requirements and all of the data, all of the relationships between the data accessible across your organization and anybody that you work with. So these frameworks are a really good way of accelerating that process. But there's a big question. So if you start with an MBSE framework, is that assuming that you're going to start with a blank page, that you're going to start without any information or any data? And of course, it's very rare these days for an organization or a project to sit in a room and say, right, we've got absolutely nothing. What are we going to create today? More commonly, we're finding that projects build themselves from other projects and existing data. So now, not only are you understanding what is an MBSE framework and how does your engineering data relate to each other, but also you've got existing data. How do you get that existing data into your MBSE framework such that then you've got a consistent set of data that you can deploy to your teams? Consistent data is very significant because firstly, it makes it far cheaper for your engineers. Engineers can move from project to project and understand what the data should look like. It also makes it far quicker to integrate other systems too. So you do want this consistent data approach, this model-based systems engineering approach, but you don't want to forget your legacy, your original data.